Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday the 30th of October and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. This is episode 57, season 7 of Motor Trade Radio, bringing you all the chatter that matters. Once again, we've gathered together this week's big car retailing stories across the franchised and independent sectors for you to enjoy all in one place, on demand, on your podcast feed. And before we go any further, a big shout out from me to Andy Condy from Mannheim and David Billsborough from Cheshire Cars for standing in last week. And Phil, I must say, I really enjoyed the new chat show format.
Yeah, it was a bit of a chit chat, and when you've got three guys that can certainly talk, with myself, Andy, and David Billsborough, filling half an hour worth of chit chat about the automotive sector wasn't too difficult, should I say? But no, I think it was good because I think, you know, as you say, Curtis, you know, getting it from the front line of what's happening in that wholesale market and from David at the retail side of things, it was a good balance between those two, and those two are always fantastic value, aren't they?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I was tuning in as a regular listener, so I really enjoyed it, and I would have been fascinated to hear the preamble before you started recording, because I should imagine that was actually longer than the recording.
Yes, yeah, and afterwards as well. So no, we got the recording in the middle, but yeah. I mean, I'm sure that all three of us would rather have been where you were, enjoying a little bit of sun and sangria. There was plenty of space on the beach, so you could have done it live from Greece. Yeah. So we must give a shout out today. So it's Halloween. So anybody that's celebrating Halloween, happy Halloween. And don't forget to put the clocks back this evening as well. So, that's for the Saturday evening if you're listening this morning. So put your clocks back tonight. But yeah, I mean, busy week. I mean, we've managed to get a fantastic interview in with Devon Martin from CAP HPI, who's talking about the October pricing trends, his thoughts on what to expect in November. And really, for me and you, it was putting context behind some of those headline figures, weren't it, Curtis?
Yes, because the headline figure is 1.2% rise for October. But as Darren pointed out, 1.2% rise, following that 5.9% rise the previous month, that there's been some talk about, what's happening to the market now. But in normal times, a 1.2% rise would have been huge.
Exactly, yeah.
Because values tended to come down before, the way the market has been distorted this year.
No, definitely. And we will play a snippet from Devon's interview shortly. And don't forget, you can listen to that through your podcast feed as well from earlier on in the week and hear the full interview there with Darren. It's always great value, and I say he adds a little bit of further context around what's been happening in the month and what to expect going forward, and just to ease that bit of concern that may have been setting in. So don't forget to tune in for that one.
And also this week we have a Menable Moment with Stephen Whitten. So that's our regular slot looking at mental health and well-being in the motor trade. And this week he looks at why it's good to talk.
Yes, at the point we both went quiet.
Yeah.
So no, you're right, and it's again we'll be playing that just after the midway break of today's podcast. But tune in for that one, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the stuff that Stephen's been doing around the world of mental health in the sector, and some of the hard work that he's putting in at the minute. And maybe we'll have to get him back on live at some point and talk to us about what the woolly hat means and what that is reference to, but we'll certainly get him back onto that one. But
yeah, he's got a very colourful woolly hat, and we don't know the backstory. So there you go, Stephen. Come back on and tell us all about it.
Exactly. So what's in the headlines this week then, Curtis?
Headlines this week, we'll get the full lowdown on the 4th annual Cox Automotive Insight Report from yourself.
Yes.
Dealers in England set to benefit from new business rates in the budget. chip shortage will impact new car deliveries into Q3 2022, warns the SMMT. Now, Tesla has become the first trillion-dollar car company following a global supply deal with Hertz. And finally, this week, we wish a happy retirement to the remarkable Brian Webb after 75 years of service at Baylis Vauxhall.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic story, that one. So do stay tuned to the end for that one, because when we talk about long service and things like that, there's a lot to be lived up to on this one, in the Curtis.
Yeah, and without spoiling that story, he was awarded a long service watch in 1970 after 25 years of service. So that's an incredible story. So look forward to talking about that one. But before we go any further, let's head over for an extract from the interview we did with Darren Martin just a couple of days ago, with Darren talking about the latest values from CAP HPI.
Yeah, so October there has been an increase during October with our live product by 1.2%, which is equivalent to about £145 on average. But probably more so than ever, the devil's in the detail this month. So it's definitely a slowdown from September activity. September was crazy. There were, as you said, the actual monetary amount was the highest we'd ever seen. The increases, it was really, really buoyant. There were lots of people out there buying, paying good money for cars, remarketers asking big money for cars. So the increase has slowed in October, but it's still an upward movement, which is and that is the first upward movement during October that we've seen. So it is unusual for values to still be going up. So it's slowed, but it's still relatively strong.
So as always, great insight there from Darren, and we said before that always great value, and many do wait for this podcast interview that we do each month with Darren, unless he's on holiday and Jeremy sits in for him. But again, sharing context there into some of the movements within the month of October, and what his views are into November and December, and that sort of, who are the winners and losers at the minute. So I think as he described in the interview there, that a very interesting month in October, not quite as everything going up as we've experienced in prior months to October. So do tune into the full interview and don't miss what Darren's got to say.
Yeah, definitely check out your podcast feed for the full interviews. So first headline this week is from AM Online, and it is Future of UK Vehicle Market and Agency Model revealed in Cox Automotive and Grant Thornton Insight Report 2021, which I know, Phil, from many conversations over recent months, has been sort of absorbing a lot of your time, hasn't it?
It does. I mean, it is as you know, it's a big piece of work that's sort of evolved over the years. This is, as I say, there it's the fourth year now this has been done, and it's I think the last word count, I think when I was sort of proofing it and approving it, was about just short of 40,000 words. To put that in context, that when somebody said, "Can I print it off in a single document?" Of which, when I said it's 166 pages without visuals, then I would suggest possibly not. But yeah, it's a big piece of work. But I think one thing from my perspective with this, it's a piece of work that is for the industry. I think it covers the big trends, talks around the global market, what to expect, and some of those big challenges and opportunities that are facing the sector going forward. So yeah, it is a significant piece of work, but it's, the feedback has been fantastic, Curtis, and from right across the sector.
And I would add to that, Phil, that despite the size of the report, it is actually easily digestible because it's interactive, it's online. You can focus in on specific sections. If you're looking at the forecasts and projections, that's all in one place. And you've got a section on electric and beyond. So it is easily accessible. It is user friendly.
No, it is, and I think that's the key with it. That you talk to someone and say, 40,000 word document or report, and they go, how do I do that? But it is all about that navigation. It is all about that interaction. You can jump into the section. If you want to look at just the new vehicle forecast and what that looks like for 2021, 22, 23 and beyond, you can do that. If you want to download a PDF for that section, you can do that, and you can share that section as well with your colleagues and friends across the sector. So it is all about that interaction, that you don't have to read it front to back. Jump in and out of it where you see areas that may be of interest, and this this isn't just this is a collaboration with Grant Thornton, with Owen Edwards. We've got Louise Wallace in there from the NFDA. We've got Chris Green in there from Regic.cars, but also, as well as all the sort of commentary and contributors from the Cox Automotive business across Europe and international markets. We've got key industry leaders there with Tom Callow from BP Pulse. You've got Dr. Michaela Kendall, Professor Dr. Michaela Kendall from Adelin, who's talking about hydrogen and EV and things like this, and even to people, Dean Hedger from the AA, and many others who have all contributed. So there's a bit of everything for everybody in there. So, and this is something that, the old days of sitting on a shelf for a long period of time, this will certainly do that. This isn't about just now. This is looking at long-term, some of those longer views of the sector.
Yeah, and I thought it'd be useful for listeners, maybe if we just focus in on those forecasts that I mentioned, because every year when you produce this report, you do a new car market forecast and a used car market forecast. So how are they looking?
Interesting, should we say, Curtis, that we've been, we've covered all the headlines and challenges facing the sector. I think, our view is for the remainder of this year, I think we're going to finish around the 1.6 million. That would be a similar performance compared to what we'd finished on in 2020, and down around 26% compared to the average between the year 2000 and 2019. At the minute we're going to wait for the October results, and then we're into two smaller months of November, December. But clearly, the chances of recovery are reducing now as the sort of the year runs out. I think around that sort of 1.6 million will be a performance figure for new cars. And as you say there, for used cars, again, similar, challenges faced there, but we've seen a strong first and second quarter of the year. We're currently waiting the third quarter results for the transactional figures, but we're forecasting about the 7.1 million used car transaction is our mid-case performance there, and that'll be a 5.7% increase on the year compared to last year, and actually a 3.2% on the average between the year 2001 and 2019. So a reasonable result, but as you and I have been talking about, Curtis, that the movement from new has gone on to used, hasn't it, as we know through the new car market challenges that we've been facing.
Yeah, and it's something that Darren Martin talked about in the interview we did with him about that supply and still strong consumer demand, but it's supply that is the real issue at the moment.
It is, yeah, and they say in the report we do our projections out there till 2023. So trying to give the sector a view of where we expect the recovery to come in to the new car market, what that means for the used car market, and our views of what that means. So looking at areas of what the four areas of necessity for vehicles, the affordability for vehicles, more importantly, more recently with the availability of vehicles, and what the economy looks like going forward as well. So plenty of context there in the report around the new and used vehicle market.
And how do listeners get hold of the report, Phil?
Either through myself on social media. If you've not seen it, then where have you been? It's all over myself and all my social channels. But you can go over to the Cox Auto website there, and there's a link through to the Insight report there that you can read, or you can go into each section there. And as I say, the link's there. And there's also a recording of the webinar from myself, Owen, Louise and Chris, where we talk through some of the main sections within the report and what to look for within it. But if you do struggle, then do drop me a line and I'll give you the links and where you need to look.
Okay, and moving on with the headlines, heading over to Car Dealer, and the headline is Dealers in England set to benefit from new business rate discount announced in budget. Now, Phil, you and I, we were talking about the budget. There wasn't a huge amount in it for the automotive sector. There were possibly measures that we were thinking might be promoted, might be introduced, might be flagged up, but there was very little in it, was there?
Yeah, no, I think it's been highly criticised, hasn't it? Because there was so much being leaked before the budget. Yeah. That people thought, well, what is there going to be left in the actual day of the budget by the time it's all been leaked? All right, we've seen some stuff around deferment of tax and on fuel duty and supporting the HGV sector, but actually you and I were talking there wasn't much around the sustainability and initiatives towards electrification of the sector, was there? There was very little in there. So we have our views on that as to maybe why, but highly criticised that there wasn't much in there.
Yeah, and of course it is COP26 this weekend, so maybe something will come out of that. Alluding to the automotive sector, we'll wait and see. But I was certainly expecting to hear more about certainly the treatment of EVs in the future. We've currently got this freeze on VD, but what's the long-term plan, especially as more EV cars and vans are being sold now?
Yeah, no, you're right. I think that others, including people like the SMMT and the NFGA, expected a little bit more in there. But you could be right. It could be, and I think you referenced it as the Blair and Brown sideshow where Rishi's delivered his bit, and maybe we're expecting Boris to sort of announce something around initiatives towards electrification and that sustainability and decarbonisation at the COP26. We don't know, and many people are hoping something will come out, but nothing as yet, as far as we know.
Yeah, and just heading back to the story briefly, it does highlight the 50% business rates discount, which was announced in the budget. So this is a temporary measure for the retail, leisure and hospitality sectors, which will see eligible firms benefit by up to a maximum of £110,000 for a year. From next year. But interestingly, in this story, Stuart James, the chief exec of the Independent Garage Association, is calling for some clarification from the government, because the independent garage sector is not necessarily being acknowledged as a retail service, and it would like that clarification, and Stuart makes a very strong argument for some clarity over that.
No, and he's right to do so, isn't he? I think he points out that the independent garages struggled throughout the lockdown period around this sort of business rate relief, etc. But I think we've got to be careful, haven't we? That it's a big sector for the automotive market in the UK, the independent dealers, and they do sometimes get forgotten. All right, we've got the big operators, the AM100 guys, but actually, these are a significant part of the sector that, like you say, they just need that clarification as to where they sit within it and what's available to them and what they get.
You're listening to All the Chatter That Matters on Motor Trade Radio, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand wherever you are on your podcast feed. And now we're delighted to hand over to Stephen Whitten from Menable for the latest Menable moment. This week, Stephen talks about his new shoulder-to-shoulder initiative and why it's good to talk in the workplace. So over to you, Stephen.
Yeah, hi guys. Thanks for another fantastic introduction, Phil and Curtis. You guys really do know how to pull this podcast together, so it's great working with you and bringing you another Men-able Moments. I've been out and about this week, so if I sound a little bit croaky, it's for two reasons. One is I had the dreaded lurgy last weekend. Not that lurgy, just the normal lurgy that we used to have pre-pandemic. Properly tested, totally negative. So before I went out and exposed myself to other people, that sounded good, didn't it? No, of course we don't do any of that. What I meant was before I went out and interacted with people and put them at risk, I made sure that, of course, it wasn't COVID. It just was the typical cold, or what we used to call man flu, which, of course, obviously we get and suffer from really badly. But croaky voice, and I've been talking a lot this week, so that's taken its toll a little bit as well. But so that's what I wanted to talk about, really, was the whole talking, and it's good to talk. And we are really building on our philosophy of shoulder to shoulder, and adding to that, shoulder to shoulder, it's good to talk. And what I mean by that is that it's all very well and good me going out and holding workshops, and employers and leaders of businesses across the automotive industry talking about culture and working practice. But if we genuinely are going to make a change and we're going to support the people around us, we need to encourage others to talk. And quite often it's those who are less inclined to talk, maybe some introverted types, that are the ones that actually need more support. So we're really kind of on a mission to just get everyone just talking about this stuff. And we have some fairly basic principles, and that is that you listen, you don't judge, you don't make an assumption. And what you certainly don't do is say anything along the lines of, well, what I would do in your situation is this, or what worked for me was this, or if I was you, I would do X, Y, Z. We don't solutionize. We never fix anything. What we do is we just listen. And what we found is that 9 times out of 10, the people that are talking and opening up, that's what they need. They need someone to talk to. They're not quite at therapy, and we've talked before about our rev counter analogy, and we're talking really now about people who, hover around about the 2 or 3 or maybe 4, but every so often things get on top of them, life gets in the way, work gets to become tough, and, the revs go up, and what they need is somebody to talk to. So the whole concept of shoulder to shoulder is to say, look, just because you're a leader or a manager, this doesn't have to be your burden, your responsibility. You have to create the environment that it makes it okay for people to talk. But let's encourage people to talk to each other, because it could be that the situation is something that they're embarrassed about or ashamed to talk about, but they'll talk about it with their peers. They'll talk about it maybe with somebody independent. They may not talk about it with somebody in a leadership position, and they may not talk about it with HR. And I'll hold that thought, because we'll come back to you on something around HR at some point in the near future. A good thing, by the way. And so what we want to do is just to say to you, look, let's just encourage everyone to stand shoulder to shoulder and just talk about stuff. To give you an example of how that would look in a day-to-day environment, this isn't about getting groups of people together in a room and, all forming a circle and talking about their problems. It's genuinely about encouraging those 2 technicians in a workshop that while they're helping each other to change a gearbox or do an oil change or check a set of brakes or whatever it might be, that they are literally physically standing shoulder to shoulder and just at the same time having a conversation about how are you today? No, genuinely, how are you today? And doing that from a shoulder to shoulder perspective. Now, I'm going to give credit to somebody for coming up with that, because it wasn't a Men-able phrase. It actually came from a conversation with Jo Moxon, who is the HR director for Marshalls. And she said, this is exactly what we should be doing, is encouraging everyone in our businesses across the entire sector to be prepared to just be shoulder to shoulder. Now, in the workshops that I've run this week, what was fairly evident was that as soon as you start talking about this stuff, people do genuinely open up. And they don't open up and say, I want counselling or I want therapy. They open up and say, yeah, I had a situation like that, and this is what happened to me, and this is how I dealt with it. Or they say, yeah, I remember working with somebody who had this situation. And quite often, they'll also open up about stuff that's personal to them. Now, some will be more inclined to do that than others, of course. But what we want to do is to create this shoulder-to-shoulder ethos around all of our businesses, so that if that's you, you genuinely can talk to a peer, a member of your team, somebody that you work with, somebody in a different department, and just open up. Now, as always, if you want help with that, that's what we're about. It's menable.org, or, as the guys will like this, because they know that I'm all over LinkedIn, you can connect with me on Stephen J. Whitten, and I'd absolutely love to have a chat. And also tell you more about the leaders forums that we've been doing, and also something else that's coming up fairly soon that we're going to do just specifically for HR people across our industry. So thanks again, guys, and we'll catch you soon on the next one. Take care.
Well, that's another great men-able moment from Steve. And this is on absolute top form, fighting through his man flu. Well done, Steve. And also a little sneak preview there of this HR initiative that he's working on. So hopefully he'll be able to reveal more at soon. Maybe his next men-able moment.
Yeah, and he, as he always alludes to, he's always there on LinkedIn and also other social channels, and he's been busy. He's been on with things with the NFDA and things like this, and I saw things where he'd been down to London for a meeting and other bits and pieces. So there's obviously something big bubbling behind the scenes somewhere that hopefully he'll give us an exclusive on and announce on the podcast. But no, fantastic work. And maybe at that same time he can tell us all about his colourful woolly hat and what reference that has on some of his sort of video blogs that he's been doing in the social space as well.
So back to the headlines, AM Online, and the headline is Semiconductor shortage will hit supply chains until Q3 2022, says the SMMT. So, yeah, no big surprise here, really, is it? Because whenever we talk about the delays and how the shortage is impacting new car production, the projection seems to be getting further and further away. So we're now in Q3 2022. I wouldn't be surprised if it lasts longer than that.
No, and I think this is the thing. There's a lot of commentators that they're not quite sure. There's there is some recovery in some of the OEMs where they're trying to find workarounds in terms of that production, but there's also where you've got some manufacturers that have actually sold out of their 2022 allocation already. Yeah. So if you did want a certain brand that you're already into 2023 before you can get one. So there's a lot of challenges there, and I think me and you were again talking before today's show where in recent days that there's been the bigger announcement now around the magnesium shortage that's hit China. So we're trying to fight our way through these semiconductors and the other raw material problems that we've got, but actually there's a shortage of magnesium now, which is the raw material for aluminium. And a lot of commentators are now saying that that is going to impact the sector further than what we're already seeing, and potentially for longer as well. So it's there's a lot going on.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out that magnesium is a raw material that's used in everything from gearboxes to steering columns, seat frames, and fuel tank covers. So, this is a big part of car production. So exactly what the car manufacturing sector did not need at this time.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's one report out there that says Europe is expected to run out of magnesium stockpiles by the end of November. So this could get even more interesting, and they're talking about that a statement called for urgent action from the European Commission and national governments to work with China to stave off the imminent risk of Europe-wide production shutdown. Yeah, I mean, talking about production and performance, we'll talk about the other headline of the week, and the Hertz and Tesla deal, and some fascinating stories on this one, isn't there, Curtis, this week,
Yeah.
depending where you look. And we've got you a top 10 as well out of this. But as you say, you said right at the start of the show that Tesla soars past the $1 trillion in market value. And that's come on the back of a 100,000 unit deal that Tesla have done with Hertz to supply the Tesla 3 over a 2-year period. To Hertz there in the global market. So, I think one thing is clear that, Tesla are never really out of the headlines, are they, Curtis?
They're not. In fact, I don't think we've been a week without mentioning them for some months now. Because I noticed you were talking about Tesla last week, last week's show. Yeah. And when I saw this story, I thought 100,000 cars, that's a sizable contracts that Hertz have put Tesla's way, but it needs a bit of context, doesn't it? Because this is over 2 years, and it's a global deal as well, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's a global deal. So there's an involvement there with Uber. So it is a supply of vehicles to Uber. I think it's a 50,000 unit per year deal out to 2023 there. And again, like you say there, Curtis, to put this in context, that Hertz have got approximately 8,500 locations across 146 countries. So, when you start talking about global deals, 100,000 units isn't quite that big, but a lot of the questions are coming out around it. What impact will it have on the used vehicle prices of Tesla 3? Will they be able to produce that many vehicles for that customer over that period of time? And I think one thing is clear. If you look at some of the volume output from Tesla over the years, he's already, I think, year to date at the end of Q3, 130,000 units up on production, where he finished the full year last year. So he is moving very, very quickly in terms of that volume production, and he's demonstrated that he hasn't had a massive impact from the supply raw material semiconductor shortages as some of the other manufacturers have had. And that may be because he operates in a slightly different market, because he definitely operates in that tech world, and he may have foreseen the problem coming, or he has different tier suppliers to look after him.
Yeah, and he's probably got his own magnesium mine.
Probably, yeah, somewhere, yeah.
Some of the figures in this story are incredible. So Elon Musk's stake in the company went up $172 billion as a result of this deal and the valuation. And again, bit of context here. So Tesla overtook Toyota as the world's most valuable car company in July last year. But since then, it has actually increased 5-fold, and it's now worth more than the next 9 car companies combined. And within the FT story, it talks about the $1 trillion club, and it's an elite club, and Tesla become only the 7th company to join it after Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, which was rebranded this week to Meta, and Alphabet, which is the owner of Google. So, that's some illustrious company it's now in with.
It is, yeah, and as you say there's a fantastic visual in the California News Times on the back of it, where they've taken a little bit of the context from the Financial Times report, but actually, you've got Tesla at the top there with the $1 trillion, and then behind you've got Toyota, and this is around their market capitalization. You've got Toyota at 279. You're then down to third place with VW at 146, BYD there at 130. You've got Daimler at 102. Then you're into GM, the Great Wall of China, the Great Wall Motors, NIO are actually next, and NIO are ahead of BMW.
Yeah.
And then Ford, then Stellantis and Honda. So you can see where they just, like you say, when you say bigger than the next 9, kind of shows the size of this, doesn't it, Curtis? I mean, it's just huge deal.
Yeah, it's astonishing. These are big numbers, and the thing that really leapt out to me was just how low Ford is, because Ford traditionally were the biggest company. It was always them vying with GM and then Toyota, but Ford have really dropped down there.
They have. So yeah, some fascinating stories there, and Hertz have put a press release out adding further context where they're talking about the Teslas to the Uber network for 2023 there, and what the deal means for them across the market there as they look to expand their electric vehicle on a mobility platform in North America, one of the largest globally. So a lot going on with Hertz there as Hertz have had some challenging times, haven't they, in recent years with being close to bankruptcy a couple of times, I believe. So there's a lot going on there, but a great story if you've not seen it.
And finally this week, Vauxhall stalwart retires after 75 years of service. So this is from AM Online, although I first saw the story on BBC News. It's a great story, this, and the AM treatment is probably the best of the bunch, because it goes into more detail about Brian Webb, who is celebrating his well-earned retirement after a Vauxhall career spanning more than 75 years. So up until his retirement, he was the warranty administrator for Bayliss Vauxhall Group in Gloucester. And as I said at the beginning of the show, it just shows how long he has been there, because he was getting a long service honour from Vauxhall in 1970. So Brian's now aged 70. He began working for Vauxhall in 1946 after walking into his local garage, which was Hoff and Whitmore in Gloucester, and asking if they had any jobs. And who could have guessed that his career would last so long?
Can you imagine the knowledge and the stories that he's got from his career? I mean, it'll be absolutely phenomenal, the things that he knows that no one else will know, will they? He's I bet he was the go-to for everything Vauxhall. I bet everybody just went to him as the go-to. But as you say there, I mean, as you say in AM there, they pulled out a few points there. So Hoff and Whitmore, London Road, Gloucester, is where he completed his apprenticeship after being working in 1945. He stayed for 25 years. And then on to Thomas Ward acquired Hoff and Whitmore in 1970, where Brian was presented with a rotary watch, as you say, Curtis, in recognition of his long service. And then Skipper takes over in 1975, and the garage relocates its current Cole Avenue site in the town in 1980s. And then, as you say there, finishing off with Bayliss Group, where Brian worked as a warranty administrator and is awarded the Vauxhall franchise in 1994. And owner Brian Bayliss purchased Skipper. So, I mean, he's been through some changes there as well, hasn't he, through his career?
He has indeed, and there's a lovely footnote to this story that he's still wearing that watch. So that rotary watch, he's still wearing it. And also, I mean, he's clearly a Vauxhall fan, because he dates owning Vauxhall cars back to 1956 with the Vauxhall Velux. So that in itself is a story. It'd be really interesting to see which models he's owned over the years.
Yeah, owns or still has as well, possibly. You never know, do you? I mean, he's probably got a whole lot of automobile memorabilia somewhere in his garage somewhere. So no, fantastic. And if you are by any chance listening, Brian, then all the best for your your retirement and your career and efforts that you've put into the automotive sector over that 75 years. Fantastic work.
Yeah, definitely. Take it easy, Brian.
So that's it, Curtis. Lots to get through. Let's say, just finishing off there, do have a listen back to the full interview there with Darren Martin. Always worth a listen, and very timely with everything that's going on there. If you haven't listened for the week before there, great interview there with Andy Condy from Mannheim and David Billsborough, a friend from Cheshire Cars. And previous to that was the long interview with Dash Gupta on his Motorline acquisition, and he was certainly on good form. And I know this week he's been out and about, so he's been out visiting the dealerships now and welcoming his new colleagues on board. So well done with that one, Dash, and hope you are feeling better.
So that's all for now. You've been listening to the weekly Motor Trade Radio podcast brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. Many thanks for joining us for all the chatter that matters. Phil and I are back again next week. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.